recorded so that it can be shared a little bit later on. We're going to be talking through today the provider access legislation, which is due to come into effect from January. There is a slight caveat with this morning, and that is that we are actually expecting within the next 2 days a possible update with some of the non-compliance elements of this. So if there are any changes or any significant changes to what we're going to run through this morning, we will add those changes to the slide deck and send them on anyway. So quick overview of the agenda today. So the agenda that we're going through today, we'll be touching on the legislation itself, some of the encounters, changes to your organisation, your establishment, the non-compliance aspects, where a careers hub can support you, a couple of examples in there, and time for questions. Now, with regard to the questions at the end, what we'd ask you to do is that probably the best thing on this is that because we are doing 2 sessions of this, and we are also doing this across multiple regions as well, is that if you have questions, please add them to the chat at the end, and we will then bring together a frequently asked questions document and add this to this pack. The other thing I'd also ask is that whilst we're running through this, can you just add your name and the role you have within your organisation to the chat so we can mark off our registers. Now, the majority of the content that I'll be going through today has come from this access for education documents that's come from the Department for Education. It was run through as a consultation in June. There was a slight update in July, and then we've had some updates from the Careers and Enterprise Company since then. And so what we've done is that we've pulled this all together and brought about this presentation today. So the legislation itself, the legislation that's due to come into effect from the 1st of January, is that all schools will need to put on at least 6 encounters for pupils over the course of the school years 8 to 13 with a provider of technical education or apprenticeships. These provider encounters must take place during normal school hours and meet specific criteria. So as we go through this presentation, you'll start looking at and seeing some of the changes that may need to be brought around against current procedures that you have with these encounters. All schools encounters must happen for a reasonable period of time during the standard school day. Provider encounters that take place outside of school hours, for example, parents' evenings, do not count. So when you are looking to build these encounters for your young people and the evidence of these, it is very specific around what does count and what doesn't count. The types of encounters is going to be very varied, and we've got some later on, but you'll start getting a feel as we go through this about how this is going to change around the substance of encounters. So every pupil, whatever their ambitions, should have opportunity to explore what it's like to learn at a full range of learning providers. So that's colleges, universities, apprenticeship and training providers, including employers. So those employer providers out there. So these are employers that deliver their own apprenticeship programs, university technical colleges and studio schools. So the 6 encounters prescribed by legislation are a minimum standard. So you can do more. You're absolutely okay to do more. However, the minimum requirement is this 6. So the new law states that 2 of these must be in school years 8 or 9, with another 2 in years 10 and 11, and a further 2 must be offered in years 12 or 13. However, like the earlier encounters, so for the years 8 and 9 and 10 and 11, 6th formers will not have to attend by law. So your 8 and 9 will be mandated to attend. Your 10 and 11 the same. Your 12 and 13 not so, because some of that group would have already have made their choices. Schools that fail to meet with the new requirements will be subject to a ladder of support and intervention, with a legal direction serving as the most severe form of punishment. So one of the things I would say is that this change does have teeth to it. We're looking at some of the final aspects of this, but there is teeth to this legislation. So it's just making that clear. So first, non-compliant schools will be given targeted support and guidance, then asked to review their careers provision. Such reviews could also be carried out by a careers hub or another school, depending on the school situation. So the review aspect about how you're adhering to this is one of the areas that we don't have a great deal of detail on. We do expect that careers hubs or schools where there are close working relationships will be able to do that checks and balance. But when we get more information on that, we will pass that across. At this stage, schools will also be subject to further monitoring in the current and following academic year to ensure they have the right support going forwards. So the complexities around this. So providers, this is just one of the complexities. So providers often have multiple qualifications and courses to offer to young people at different ages. The legislation includes flexibility for schools to arrange meetings with the same provider across more than 1 year, one key phase. So one of the examples we had here is if an FE college comes along, does 5 days in a row with the 5 different year groups, will that qualify? To an extent it will, but it will all rely on the content. So, for an example, a school may invite an FE college to talk to pupils in the first phase about key stage 4 options, and then talk to pupils about the second key phase for 10, 11 about post 16 options. So again, it's all about, and this will become very clear, it's all about that content and how that content can then relate to that young person. However, within the same key phase, the schools must always provide encounters with 2 different providers to meet the legal requirement. This means that an FE college talking to pupils multiple times across years 10 and 11 would only count as one mandatory provider encounter under the terms of the legal duty. Okay, so this is again where you're looking at having different options for your student groups. Schools should prepare for each provider visit by advising pupils and their parents to consult provider websites for background information, including details of the courses and qualifications that the provider offers and their Ofsted grades. Now, one of the themes that will come through this is around the parent piece. There is a ramping up in here around parents being involved and understanding, the encounters that their young people will be having. This goes on to say we encourage schools to involve parents in the process by informing them of the providers that will be invited to speak to pupils. And how you do that, we will come on to a little bit later on. So the range of technical options, schools and colleges have a responsibility to set pupils on the path that will secure the best outcome. So this means that schools must act impartially and not show bias towards any route, be that academic or technical. Schools must open their doors to other education providers because it's vital to ensure that all pupils are aware of the benefits of the apprenticeships, T-levels and other approved technical education qualifications. So to put this into context, some of the messaging is at times very university centric. Okay, we do know of instances out there where if a school has a sixth form attached to it, around there may be concerns about inviting another sixth form provider in, and these are things that you will need to look at going forward because that will go against the whole thing around impartiality. So the encounters, so 2 encounters for pupils during the first key phase to take place any time during year 8 or between the 1st of September and the 28th of February during year 9. So this 28th of February seems to be a date that's set in stone. So all of your encounters need to take place for that group by that period of time. We don't have any information about why that. The only conclusion we can draw is to allow those young people the remainder of that academic year to reflect and review and look going forwards. This also is the same for the year 10 group. And then for the 2 encounters for the third key phase, which is year 12 or 13, so also take place during that time. So schools should encourage all pupils to attend the encounters. However, optional attendance for older pupils recognises that whilst many 16 to 18-year-olds will benefit from finding out more about the post-18 technical options, some will be in the sixth form, having made a firm decision to pursue their chosen pathway. So what they're basically saying there is that if you have a young person in that third phase who already knows their options, where they're going, then there's no requirement to try and force or to accommodate for that young person. However, what you will need is that if you are challenged on that, is to have that evidenced that those choices are done. So the types of encounters, so general further education colleges, independent training providers, institutes of technology, university technical colleges, studio schools and virtual encounters. So increasing number of our providers have national delivery. So where we're talking about that, we're looking at the independent training providers. There are large independent training providers out there working with multiple large organizations that may not have offices based in the south, but will have delivery teams there. So that will then bring where the virtual encounters comes into it. But it also then brings in independent training providers, which in the past historically have not been the first go-to. However, there is some really good provision out there. So the sharing requirement with these delivery partners, okay, so schools and providers should work together, and schools must ask each provider to provide information to pupils that, as a minimum, includes. So that's the point there, as a minimum includes. So what you're then looking at here is that this is an additional requirement for information gathering before you roll this out and tell your young people and their parents. So information about that provider and the approved technical education qualifications or apprenticeships that the provider offers. Information about the careers to which these technical education qualifications or apprentices might lead. A description of what learning or training with this provider is like. Responses to questions from pupils about the provider or approved technical education qualifications and apprenticeships, and where possible, progression pathways. So if they are a provider of T levels, and how that passing that T level can then move on to a level 4 apprenticeship or vice versa, or any of the options into the higher apprenticeships or the higher technical qualifications, which are due to come into effect next year. So as you can see, there is there's more of a requirement there to have a rounded picture of not just what the offer is, but where the opportunity is there and how this can then benefit that young person going forward. So the changes required. So these are changes required within your organization. So first things first, you will need to change your provider access statement to reflect the range of provider encounters that the school will offer. All schools are legislated to have this document on their website about how they encourage external visitors and to support their young people. So that document in itself will need to be updated and changed to reflect these changes. Every school should review their arrangements for provider access in line with the change to legislation and prepare a new policy statement setting out the circumstances in which education and training providers will be given access to the pupils. The policy statement must be published either as part or alongside the wider careers programme and should be made available on the school website. We expect a policy statement to be published for each academy, sorry, I had this problem yesterday, within a multi-academy trust. So if you have 4 or 5 organizations within that mat, then you need one for each. Okay. So as you can see there are changes there. The on the website as well, just to add to the website, is that the Careers and Enterprise Company do review these, and they have this requirement that your access to this document is no more than 3 clicks away from your main page. So just bear that one in mind as well. So recommendation. So this is only a recommendation that the Careers Leader and Careers Hub to review and when necessary update the careers policy annually. The reason why this recommendation is that the careers policy itself is not legislated. The provider access statement is, but the careers policy isn't. However, we'll start getting a theme here now about working with careers hubs because there is a wealth of knowledge there that can support you. Now I'm talking in the so should we say the third person here is because we do have attendees here today who are from outside of the Solent Careers Hub, who will be working, who will have other hubs to work with. So the DBS example, so a UTC or an apprenticeship provider may ask to bring a key employer with them on a provider visit. The school should consider such requests and consent cannot be withheld unreasonably. Schools and colleges should not require a disclosure and barring service check for a visitor who is at the school for a one-off. However, head teachers and principals should decide on the appropriate level of supervision for the duration of that visit. We know for the majority of schools that takes place anyway, but what it's basically saying there is that it shouldn't be a barrier to a visit. The provider access statement should also include an explanation on how the school will comply with the new legal requirements to put on at least 6 encounters with providers of approved technical education. Any procedural requirements in relation to requests for access, so the main point of contact to the school and to whom requests should be directed, and grounds for granting and refusing requests for access, details of timetable, careers, lessons, assemblies or career events which providers may attend, and should include the safeguarding policy. Now, one of the things I would say is that that document that I put on the first page, we will send the link out for that. There is examples of a template in there that you can look at and review to use within your establishment on that side of things. Details of the premises or facilities to be provided to a person who is being given access, i.e. the rooms and resources that will be made available to support that visit. The policy statement should also include how the school will work with each visiting provider, a list of the providers that have previously been invited into the school. If the school accepts live online encounters, destinations of previous pupils. Now, I put that in bold is because generally in the past, that has not been listed within from what we've seen within provider access statement. So if you've got that in your provider access statements now, then great. If you don't, then there's a call. They're looking at the general destinations of your previous pupils. Information about how a provider can raise a complaint and the procedure that will be followed. Now, this complaint side does work both ways. Okay, so what this is now saying is that if a provider further feels that an establishment is excluding them and there is no justification to that exclusion, they can raise a complaint about that establishment, and I'll come on to that a little bit later on. This can be incorporated within a wider careers policy for the school. It must be clear on the opportunities for providers to visit the school and talk directly to the pupils. So open events, which we know from experience is one of the areas where this messaging has been put across in the past. So there is scope for schools to consider carefully the frequency and scale of encounters and work with providers to tailor them to the pupil needs. For example, the school may decide to arrange an annual event for a whole year group and invite multiple providers, or work with a group of providers to deliver one presentation covering multiple further education T-level apprenticeship opportunities in the local area. Job careers events and open evenings will not be substantive enough to qualify as a meaningful encounter. So the thing that we've put there is about this presentation. Okay, the whole element of the whole thing around open events, where they will need to evolve to now is that there is a presentation that is tailored for a group, and then coming on to it a little bit later on is that there is a Q&A session available for those young people to either ask those questions in a group or stay behind to speak to the presenters around those opportunities. So the non-compliance element. So non-compliance, in the first instance, the Careers and Enterprise Company Careers Hubs will support interaction and engagement. And this is a key point with getting this off the ground and moving going forward is that if you have relationships with your Careers Hub, then look to call on those relationships. If you don't have those, I do have information about all of the Careers Hubs that in a later slide that you can then make contact with to help support with this. Some of our organizations out there, will be looking at this and thinking, that's fine. It's where we are now. It's just looking at where the support is that you can call on. Engagement will not be limited to colleges and universities, and that's a very clear point. There is that you're literally looking at outside of the norm, which has historically happened, is that it is having that breadth there of those encounters. The support stage. So this is the very first part. So schools will be actively encouraged to engage with the Careers Hub in the planning compliant activity. Where an education provider fails to collaborate with a school, this could be escalated to a Careers Hub, the Careers and Enterprise Company, or the Department for Education as a formal complaint. Now, a finite detail behind that escalation is we're hoping to find out this week, because it will look at, there will be a possibility there that a Careers Hub will, in the first instance, look at mediating, or it could be a local school, that's one of the areas whereby that we're looking for more information. However, formal complaints can be sent direct to the Department for Education. So this can be from a provider about a school and vice versa. The Careers Hubs will then be asked to review specific concern and mediate for a solution. Continued non-compliance can result in an independent quality assurance of non-compliant party. Okay, so this is what the Department for Education have said. They will bring in external to look at this if there's continued non-compliance and there's no justification to it. So this is the ladder of support and intervention. So the first instance, support. So the school will be reminded of the obligations under this legislation. The review, a school will then required to review the careers provision. This could be self-assessment or undertaken by a careers hub. the plan, the school will be strongly encouraged to undertake an expert review or independent quality assurance of the careers provision focused on the provider access legislation. The training, if the school continues to be non-compliant, an official or a minister from the Department for Education will write to the school reminding them of the requirements of the duty and will state a date that the school will need to comply to avoid moving to formal intervention. And the formal intervention part is where the Secretary of State will use their intervention powers. So what you're looking at here is that you're not just looking at not allowing access and vice versa. You're also then, this will also then cover the numbers of engagements and encounters that you are putting on. So if it's then found, and all the way to the the compliance around the access documents, etc., etc. If you're found that you're not complying with those, this will be the ladder of intervention that will come into effect. So the intervention stage on this, so a dedicated email address has been set up for providers to raise complaints. In the event of persistent non-compliance, the school would move up the ladder with higher steps, including the expert review on the school's careers provision, with a focus on provider access, a letter from an official or DfE minister, careers leader training, and the use of Secretary of State's intervention powers. In extreme cases, if all other options have been exhausted, the school could lose access to government-funded career support or be placed under a legal direction to comply with the provider access legislation. And that's the teeth element of this. That they put, so worst case scenario, DfE will get involved and take over. So what's behind this? So a little bit of information about what's pushing this through. Okay, and this is coming a little away from the provider access legislation, but it's forming what started this off. So what we know is that from previous source documents that 2/3 of schools were still found to be flouting the controversial Baker Clause a year of was introducing, so leading for calls for Ofsted to police this rule. So on a survey, 63% of 101 secondary schools surveyed had failed to issue a policy statement. What I will say, for the Solent area, we are currently at 77%. So there are still schools out there within our region that do not have a policy statement on their web pages. The Baker Clause, introduced in January 2018, stipulates schools must ensure a range of FE providers have access to pupils from years 8 to 13 to provide information on technical education and apprenticeships. A report published by the Institute of Public Policy Researchers warned the Baker Clause has failed to achieve its aims. The report said there is a focus on pupil retention rather than supporting students and their families to understand the options available, because schools are largely funded on a per pupil basis. It recommends Ofsted assesses compliance with the Baker Clause as part of a wider judgment on schools' guidance. It then also goes on to say the careers guidance would be ranked between inadequate and outstanding, and any school receives the lowest grade or does not comply, it could end up with a limiting grade. A spokesperson for the Department of Education said schools who are not supplying pupils with the necessary information will be asked for evidence and compliance with Baker Clause. So he also added that the Department for Education will take appropriate action against schools who do not supply this evidence. So this is, there's a little bit of history and date behind this information. So what we've done in the Solent is that we've then moved this on and had a look at how Ofsted are starting to, say, motor on these things. So the Ofsted's grade criteria set out the expectation of school with a good personal development will meet the requirements of the provider access legislation. And where this is not the case, inspectors will state this in the published inspection report, and they will consider what impact this has on the quality of careers advice and guidance and subsequent judgment for personal development. So to put this into context, one of the things that we've looked at was our Ofsted inspections within the Solent area. So between March 2020 and April 2022, so there are 101 schools and colleges within the Solent area, just to put this into context. The CIAG was mentioned in personal development in 1 of 32 inspections, okay, within the Solent area. However, since May of this year, 14 full inspections have taken place and 9 have had this now scrutinised. And as part of that, we've asked for feedback on those schools, and these were the common things that were being looked at. So the inspectors were starting to look more at reviewing the Compass upload. So that's the Gatsby benchmark performance for that establishment. Also, how does the school personalise its careers advice and guidance? Did the school have an enterprise advisor on how that collaboration worked and was beneficial to the organisation? School supporting parents with undertaking next steps, and this is a big piece moving forward around parents. How does the school deliver the Baker Clause? How does careers fit into the wider curriculum? And then also scrutiny of the careers policy. So you can see there is a move forward. So combining that with this provider access, there is a growing focus on the careers piece within our education providers. So careers hub supports. So what is a careers hub? Okay, so I will talk quickly about the Solent Careers Hub. So as I said, we have 101 schools and colleges within our catchment area. And as things stand, just over 90 of those actively engage with us. Now, we have a resource within our teams which are called enterprise coordinators. And I apologize if some of you know this. I'm just running through for the entire audience. Those enterprise coordinators will have a caseload of schools that they will work closely with. And as part of that collaboration, they are there to support first and foremost on achieving Gatsby benchmarks, but then also helping that school or college or organization around the careers piece, around the employer and industry piece. Because one of the added benefits of working with a careers hub like with a Solent LEP is that we have two parts to our organization. We have the skills and careers, and then we have the industry and enterprise element. So we can bring the two together. Hubs will offer schools and colleges dedicated support from a local hub team and facilitate partnerships with employers committed to improving careers across an area. The goal is to make it easier for schools and colleges to improve how they prepare young people for their next steps. So the Careers Hub will have multiple stakeholder groups. So with what we're then talking about there is that we are actually as a group not so much governed, but what we do on our day to day is steered as such by our local stakeholders, because what we do is predominantly around collaboration. So we work with all of our local authorities. We have a steering group which is set up of universities, lead colleges, lead schools within our region, where we then start looking at strategy and areas of support. We have Cornerstones employers. With the Cornerstones employers groups, we're then starting to look at we're looking at next step skills. We're looking at labour market shortages, skills shortages in the area, and how we drive strategy to deliver on those. There are 45 hubs in the England, and which will open doors outside of your region. So if, as I said, I come back to that is that if you are not working with a hub, then I would strongly recommend you do work with that hub, because there is a lot that they can bring to bear and support. So providers will be able to access support from a careers hub, including access to local networks information. So a nominated provider access hub lead will be able to provide personal advice to providers on requests. So hubs will work in partnership with schools to identify relevant providers in their areas and support schools to identify opportunities to tailor support based on local context and need. So what we're talking there is that some of our schools will be, okay, I'm used to working with a university, I'm used to working with our FE provider, or, however, I don't know much about independent training providers. I'm not sure that I want to let them in, because I don't know much about that. As a hub, we can help support that information. We can show you where that information is. And the other thing to remember is that like with anything, the service is free, but the collaboration is two-way, and that's one of the key things there. Is that hubs are there to drive Gatsby benchmark and bridge that gap between education providers and industry to prepare people for their next steps. If you're going to be working with a hub, then that two-way collaboration is around working towards those Gatsby benchmarks, and then the support around helping you with PAS will come naturally the other way. So this is the Central South hubs. So as we put there, I've got them there. We've got several around us. Solent smack bang in the middle of there. I know that we have colleagues here from Enterprise M3 today, because Hampshire County Council helped push this invite out. So from the Solent side of things, we are New Forest, Southampton, Eastleigh, Fareham, Gosport, Portsmouth, Havant, and the Isle of Wight. So quite an extensive area. So talking about the parents piece, and I've alluded to this quite a bit all the way through this. So the majority of hubs in England have a community of practice around parent voice and the participation in careers, advice and guidance. This is quite new. I will add that caveat, and I've turned around and said the majority. So at the moment, the Solent hub, we don't have one. Okay, we are working on one. However, one of the key strategies behind this is to enable parents and influencers, so grandparents, family members, etc., to, with a modicum of confidence, support and challenge on their young people's next steps. The idea here is that parents can sit with their young people when they're talking about their next steps, and know or have the resources at hand about how they can have those conversations. There will be parents even not trying to take away from those either there, but it's so that they are away from the school environment. There are constructive conversations taking place around, okay, this is your opportunity to doing next, and this is how it can support you. So, can you invite providers to parents' evenings to help parents become familiar with all options available to their child? Now, we have seen examples where that does actually take place, or where additional support comes in, and they're talking about next steps and adding a little bit more, should we say, meat to the bones around the apprenticeship delivery, around T levels, what they're involved. Would also turn around and say, get feedback from parents on the encounters to help establish the strengths and opportunities with these encounters and schools careers programs. That will then help you change and evolve things going forwards. So the planning aspects, moving on to planning. So review your current collaborations. Arrange meetings with providers to see through 22-23 and then work on planning for 23-24. If you look at the example that's provided within the DFE document on this, it is literally laying out for the following year all the terms and when these visits are going to take place. So it's a big ask to get that planning up and running at such an early stage. Update your provider access statements or careers policy to reflect these changes. Meet with your careers hub resource to explore support. On average, each enterprise coordinator will have a caseload of 15 to 25 schools, which will create a lot of demand. So with this coming and there being less than 10 working days, should we say, before the break, there will be a sudden rush, and our team has been set up for this, of saying, right, when can we meet? When can we run through that? So what I'm basically saying there is to get in there quickly. If you don't have those meetings set up, then look to get them done. Get action plans set up and create a schedule of recurring reviews. Again, those enterprise coordinators are there to work with your schools on that. So they will work with you as often as you say you will allow them in to work with you on that. So look at those action plans, look at your careers leaders, your careers advice, maybe look at your senior leadership team and the interaction there, and about how using that external resource can help. Consult with other senior leadership to understand plans and generate consistent offer. What we're talking about here is, as I said there, the majority of towns within the Solent will have at least 2 secondary schools in catchment areas. So what you don't want then is an inconsistent offer against town, because that will get around. And you don't want it to, maybe in the long term, and I'm only saying maybe in the long term, impact on future student numbers. Okay, so you want to have that consistency across that area. How will you capture these encounters? Does resource require CPD? Senior leadership to advise governors of these changes, and that's another one. Is that if you have a linked governor, then advise them of these changes so that there can be that consultation within the organisation, and that review on those side of things. And again, the governors are more than welcome to speak to careers hubs around these to look at that challenge and how they put that in place. The other part there is about how you capture these encounters, and there are means and ways about capturing the encounters. So the majority of our schools utilize a system called Compass Plus. There are others out there called, there's another one out there called Unifrog, and a couple of other off-the-shelf products out there. What these basically are is they capture the careers interaction and career support at student level. So at the moment, 90% of the 101 schools and colleges within the Solent area of opportunity utilize Compass Plus. Okay. But however, only 30% of those use that on a regular basis. So less than 1 in 3. And when they say on a regular basis, that means logging in a maximum of every 6 weeks. Minimum of every 6 weeks, to update information within there. What Compass Plus will enable you to do is to capture these encounters and allow for speedy reporting the school is challenged. And that's key there, because there will be a point come along where you will be challenged to evidence these encounters. And what you don't want to then do at times is rely on an Excel spreadsheet, because they can corrupt, they might not be the easiest to get at, the shared system may not allow you at the time. So, one of the things that we're talking about here is to utilize Compass Plus if you have it to add this information. So the Careers Hub and Careers and Enterprise Company have resources to help a customer with this system. So again, coming back to the CPD on Compass Plus, if your resource within your organization is not sure how to use it, how to get the best out of it, is not comfortable with it, then look at either go to the Careers and Enterprise Company webpage where they have videos, or then come to your Careers Hub and look and see where, with enough notice, how we can then set up training sessions. I won't run through this, but this quickly tells you how to record one of these encounters on Compass Plus. Okay, so there's a few stages there. I asked one of the team to pull this together, but it then goes on to show you how simple it is to do that. And it's probably best to do that as quickly as possible and use that. So some of the examples, I'm going to quickly read through some of these examples. So I've got examples for each of the 3-year groups that we've got here. So School A puts on a University Technical College event for all Year 8 pupils in the autumn term during school hours. During the event, the UTC provides a presentation about what courses are on offer, or what kind of careers routes follow certain routes. Former and current UTC pupils speak at the event about their personal experience. The UTC staff offer a Q&A to all pupils, ensuring they answer all questions. A prospectus is handed out, or a link to a digital prospectus is handed out for the pupils to take home. So that same school puts on a Key Stage 4 options event during the autumn term and invites a college and an apprenticeship provider to present during an assembly. Both presentations offer an overview of the Key Stage 4 technical options and apprenticeships. Following the presentation, the providers offer a Q&A and ensure they answer all questions. Additional information is handed out to pupils to take home to discuss with their parents. So we know straight away that, with this here, this is where you're looking at, absolute nailed on event, and some of this will, you maybe sat there thinking, well, if I go to a provider and ask them to bring some students along, they may not be able to bring those students along. Does that then mean it's not going to be a relevant encounter? What this is, as with any example, you're looking here about what the best, should we say, it can be. One of the things that will come out of this going forward again is this whole thing around not just having a blanket message for a whole group. It's around having individuals, because the encounter is around that student, that individual student, and the Q&A aspect of that, and being able to review that, but then also having that breadth there, so that it's not just the same college coming in. We know, I'll relate to yesterday is that I was traveling in a train station yesterday. I got off the train at Portsmouth, and there's a big sign there for Havant and South Downs College, and it says on there 1 in 3 of their students come from Portsmouth. So we know that students travel. So then you're then looking at is that if you are, say, in Eastleigh, are you then inviting someone like Fareham College to come along, Southampton City College to come along and do those things? So again, it's having that breadth there and having that exposure to different offers. So an example for years 10 and 11. So a school invites a general FE college to speak at a morning assembly to all year 10 pupils about post-16 technical options. Prior to the assembly, the school sends out the college website link to all pupils and parents, signposting them to general information about the college, its technical education and the apprenticeship provision and Ofsted rating. On the day, the provider representative delivers a presentation about the college, its courses and qualification, and possible careers routes. Short video clips from a number of college pupils explain what it's like to learn at the college, and the college ends the assembly with a Q&A. So another thing picking on there is around the whole progression routes. Okay, looking at providers turning around and saying that if my young person wants to do a level 2 apprenticeship in health and social care, is that they can then go on to use that qualification and then go on to do something like level 4 in a nursing discipline. Okay, so it's all about where those opportunities are. So the same school invites an apprenticeship provider to speak to the same pupils once they move into year 11 to talk about the post-16 apprenticeship options. The assembly follows the same format and offers the same pupils the chance to learn about apprenticeships and the careers they might lead to and ask questions. The provider representative brings 2 young apprentices from the local area to talk to pupils about their experiences of apprenticeships and their future careers ambitions. Okay, so again, it's where there's that human story in there and the relevance and how those young people can relate to that. So, an encounter for 12-13. So, school holds a higher education fair for a variety of HE providers, including local further education colleges. The fair is held during school hours and allows the opportunity for pupils to learn about higher and further education options. Attendance is optional, but encouragement given to those students that have not made a firm choice. Try and include parents. So the same school invites a higher and degree apprenticeship provider to a timetabled lesson. We post 18 options during the autumn term. The timetabled lesson starts with a presentation from providers and ends with a Q&A. The encounter offers years 13 pupils a chance to learn about the higher and degree apprenticeships and the careers they might lead to. The encounter is optional for pupils to attend, but the school encourages pupils that have not decided on next steps to attend. School A has achieved the minimum requirements to offer 2 encounters during the year 12 to 13 phase for all pupils during school hours. So again, that part there about during school hours, about the opportunity to reflect, review, and ask questions and get further information. So some of the questions that we're still looking at. The first one, we pretty much, will there be an approved register of providers? What I can turn around and say on there is that it's unlikely there'll be an approved one. However, we are working with local authorities on this at the moment because there is a desire to look at some form of due diligence or checks and balances on some of these so that we can pass that on to our schools. What I will turn around and say, and again, we will share this, there is enough information out there. So there's a register of apprentice training providers. There are there's information on .gov.uk about training provision, about the services they deliver, that you can have a look through. How does a school complain, how does a school complain about a provider? Okay, we're waiting for more information. Due diligence on independent training providers. Well, if one of the things we're looking at there is just to confirm is that if they are on a register, then they will have been checked by the ESFA as part of that due diligence, and that is quite an in-depth one. But again, we're looking at how we as the Solent, and I can't talk about other hubs, but we as the Solent are looking at bringing together lists. Now, ideally, we want that to be a digital directory, and we are working with a digital provider to see if we can do that. If not, in the first interim, our enterprise coordinators will share that information. It will probably look at that. Our enterprise coordinators will come to the schools, collect who they've been working with, and then just pull all that information together. So there are a couple of the questions that we've got there. So that ends the presentation and our questions. I think we are looking okay for time. So do we have anything in the chat box?
I've answered as many as I can, Darren, in the chat box we've been going, but obviously it is a great opportunity for anybody to ask any specific questions they'd like to ask at this point.
One of the things I would turn around and say again is that because there is quite a relative short turnaround time on this, it seems to have crept up very quickly, is that if you're not sure, then speak to colleagues, because we know there are enough head groups out there. We know there are enough careers leaders groups out there. You've got the careers hub. It is ask, call on that support. It's there to help. It's literally why we are funded. There are a team of 8 of us here to support that. So just call on that.
And it looks like we've lost Darren just in that moment of time, so I'm sure he will rejoin. Is there anybody on the call that wants to ask anything specific? And the only thing I will say, and you'll see in some of the chat, is that some of the questions I can't answer specifically, and that is obviously based on the continuation of guidance that we will gain from tomorrow going forward. So obviously we will look to offer an additional session, and it probably will be in January, so that we can inform you of the updates that we get. We're not thinking that we're going to have massive changes with regards to what has been presented today, but there just may be a couple of things, and obviously some clarification on send and Prue and so on, which are some of the questions we've had in the chat. So obviously we'll be happy to do that. Obviously, Darren, you jumped off. It was perfect timing, however, because you had completed the presentation at least. So I was just offering the room to ask any questions, but to confirm that obviously we will have further clarification on things to come, and we will look to run another session in January to support that.
The other thing I'd say to that as well is that in the Solent area, we have a newsletter. Okay, it goes out to all of our schools. The plan is around our newsletter is that we will then start adding to that some examples of best practice sharing, so you can then start looking at pulling on that. The other thing is that with this steering group that we have, the requirement, the terms of reference in that steering group is that the members of that, the senior leaders and the members of that group will actually go to other schools to do best practice sharing, and pass that information on about how they're doing it, because we know that some of our schools are very much ahead of what they've been doing because they've embedded it for many years, and that's not necessarily the case with everyone, but it's again how we can then share that. And I can absolutely assure you that for the majority of them, they love sharing what they've done well. Okay, so we will pass that on. So I think we'll end it there. I mean, you've got 10 minutes, grab a coffee, tea before the day really gets mental and busy. Thank you for attending today. Really appreciate it. We will share all this information. As I said, I can't stress enough. Any questions, no matter where they are, send them back. We will send you. We have a generic email address. You'll also get myself and Naomi. And if you are struggling to actually make contact with your own hub, come through to us, because our lead at the Careers and Enterprise Company oversees all those local hubs I've talked about, and we can make the engagement happen that way. So have a great day. Have a great Christmas. I know it's a bit early, and hopefully we will see you all soon. Stop recording now, Naomi.